Step into the world of Castlevania, a realm where the Belmont clan, armed with their trusty whips, had been battling the darkest of souls since the 80s. But these aren't your ordinary enemies. We're talking about classic horror monsters brought to life in pixelated and animated glory. From the adventures in the early games to the more recent blood-soaked Netflix anime series, the Castlevania franchise has been a treasure trove of creepy creatures. In this spine-tingling episode, we're delving into the cryptic fantasy of Castlevania, unveiling the most dangerous and spine-chilling monsters to ever haunt the Belmont's path. You'll meet your fair share of ghouls, ghosts, and things that go bump in the night as we journey through the games and the animated series. So fellas, how many of these nefarious beings had you on the edge of your seat, controller in hand? Buckle up, it's time to explore the world of powerful and the terrifying Castlevania monsters. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin.
Give me power!
Dracula's second form, Castlevania Rondo of Blood. The granddaddy of all video game villains, Count Dracula Vlad Tepes. The final boss, the guy you love to hate in most of the games except a few where he apparently took a vacation from being evil. Well, kind of. You might be surprised that he wasn't always a vampire lord. He started out with the much less ominous name Matthias Krogfist. Sounds like a math teacher, right? But things took a dark turn. His first wife bit the dust, and that sent him spiraling into madness. That's when he decided to change gears and become an immortal vampire, thanks to the magical powers of the Crimson Stone. With his newfound vampire mojo, he set about building Castlevania, which isn't exactly the kind of property you'd find on Zillow. It's more of a fixer-upper fortress filled with creatures and creepy crawlies. From the 11th century onward, it's like a broken record. Dracula comes back from the dead, and the Belmont clan, a bunch of warriors, stands ready to smack him down. Finally, in 1999, Dracula met his match. The last Belmont took him down for good, and here's an interesting tidbit from the past. In some early versions of this story, Dracula was basically a demon worshipper who sold his soul and even his son Alucard's soul to an evil god in exchange for superpowers. But as time went on, they retconned the story a bit. Alucard was actually born as a vampire-human hybrid, and Dracula still became the Dark Lord through a different shady deal with the same evil god. Some things never change, I guess.
And you people all took my treasure from me.
Death. In the world of video games, there's a boss that's been hunting players for eons. We're talking about the Grim Reaper himself, or just Death for short. In the video game universe, Death is practically a rock star, making appearances in nearly every big-name title of the series. Death, as the name suggests, isn't the cheeriest character. He's actually born out of chaos, which is essentially another dark boss in the game, and this entire chaotic mess sprang from the evil in human hearts. Now, Death is Dracula's right-hand minion. If Dracula's the king of darkness, then Death's the cunning advisor. He often pops up near the end of the hero's epic quest just to throw down a challenge before they face the big boss himself. But don't underestimate him. Death can be a real game changer. He's not only a sidekick, he's got a whole bag of dark tricks. He can summon the souls of the departed, sending even the mightiest of heroes to an early game over screen. And when it comes to beating Death, you can't just waltz in with any old weapon and expect to win. Death's pretty tough, especially against dark-based attacks. But there's a chink. Weapons with holy properties like the legendary Vampire Killer can bring him to his bony knees.
You monkeys don't deserve redemption. It is my divine right to rule by his side as an equal. Or perhaps more than that.
Satan. Imagine you've spent an entire game hunting down Dracula, thinking he's the ultimate bad guy, then bam! Plot twist, you've actually been playing Dracula himself the whole time. So what's the game designers do? Well, you bring in an even bigger, badder villain. And in this case, that's Satan. The ultimate enemy of Dracula takes the spotlight in Castlevania Lords of the Shadow series. He's the guy who secretly possessed Zobek, a big wig in the Brotherhood of Light, and gave him a power and knowledge boost. This devilish mastermind pulled all the strings in the events of Lords of Shadow. He's the puppeteer behind the scenes, making the heroes dance to his dark tune. And what's his motivation? Well, he's all about manipulation. He'll twist the minds of anyone he can to get what he wants. And he even tries to play the sympathy card, talking about how he was abandoned by his parents. Satan isn't your average video game boss. He's an archangel and his power is off the charts. On Earth, it's like he's holding back, but don't be fooled. This guy's an immortal and he's been around since the dawn of time. No, you just can't hit him with your best combo moves and call it a day. In fact, there's only one thing that can kill this ultimate villain, the legendary vampire killer. Chaos, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. The final boss of Castlevania Aria of Sorrow isn't just a big baddie. It's Chaos, the evil hiding in the shadows, and it's not just a one-time baddie. It's the thread that weaves through the entire Castlevania series, the dark force that powers up Dracula himself. So what is this Chaos, you ask? It's like the birthplace of all things twisted and chaotic, a cosmic dumpster fire of evil. It's the complete opposite of God, and it hands out powers that are essentially a supernatural controller for monsters and humans who've taken a nosedive into negativity. They call it the power of dominance. Dracula wasn't just born with his fangs and cape, he had to make a deal with the evil god back in 1476 to score these chaos powers. Why? Because he had a plan to wipe out humanity, and you need some serious firepower for that kind of endeavor. But Chaos chooses a new Dark Lord to carry on the evil legacy. This time it's Soma Cruz, our protagonist. But Soma's not having it. He's not about to sit back and let Chaos dictate his fate. Armed with his determination and bravery, he faces off with Chaos in a room. Chaos kicks off the battle by snatching away all of Soma's collected souls, well, except for the ability souls, and if you dig deep enough into the game's files, you'll find a pic of Chaos that never made it to the final version. It's a secret level of evil you weren't meant to see. The Cyclops. Meet the Cyclops, a regular guest star in the Castlevania series. He is a massive one-eyed behemoth that's not exactly winning any Fastest Monster of the Year awards, but when it comes to raw power, this guy takes the cake. He's got a nifty trick, or rather up his mono eye, a laser beam. You've read that right, the name Cyclops might ring a bell from Greek mythology. These guys were ancient giants with just one big round eye, hence the name. In Castlevania, they're a bit more on the destructive side. One memorable moment was when the Cyclops made a little statue out of Sypha Belnati's in Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. Then he had the audacity to guard her until the heroic Trevor Belmont taught him a lesson in monster manners. But this guy just can't stay out of trouble. He showed up again in Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance, this time with a few upgrades. He's faster, stronger, and even has some slick dash attacks. In the animated version of Dracula's Curse, they gave him the nickname Stone Eye Cyclops. Trevor Belmont explained that this guy feeds on the fear of his victims, while they're stuck as statues, and it might look like the Cyclops is just taking a leisurely stroll and completely ignoring the player. But don't be fooled. Get too close and he'll try to squish you with his massive hammer. And if you're far away, watch out, he can charge at you like a rhino with a serious grudge. Legion. This boss in the game is so iconic, they all call him the one who is many. But don't let that fool you, this isn't some gang of villains. The whole design of Legion is a bit on the biblical side, with roots in a story about demons, or maybe a demon family that took over a poor guy. Legion rolls into town as a floating sphere, and it's got an outer shell that's basically a massive pile of humanoid bodies. Yeah, you've heard that right. Imagine a giant, deformed flesh sandwich with a crunchy human crust. Now, the more creepy part is that this outer mound of flesh hides an inner core. What's in that core? It depends on which version of the game you're playing. And if you're a fan of the animated series, you might remember Legion making an appearance in Season 3. In this version, it's basically a giant pile of people controlled by the magician, who puts a spell on a village and its neighbors. The result, a bunch of obedient villagers who've lost their willpower and turned into puppets for the magician.
The sun is already down.
Ward Blue Fangs. Blue Fangs is the dark beast you might remember from the Netflix animated series. Now, he's not your typical demon in Dracula's army. He stands out because he's the one who had a beef with a bishop. Blue Fangs was like the head honcho of the Night Horde when they attacked Greshit. But don't be fooled by the fearsome appearance. He's got brains to match his brawn. In fact, he's pretty well spoken and knows his way around a dictionary. And he's got a solid grasp of morality too. Who knew even demons could have a moral compass? His awareness is up to a human scholar as he calls out hypocrisy, and he's not shy about acknowledging his own evil nature. It was evident that Blue Fangs wasn't a fan of the bishop and his self-serving, despicable actions. Some say it's the blue glowing eyes that are his signature look, and there's a theory that Hector, the Forge Master, might have had a hand in creating this demon. But we can't be too sure of it, and he had also proved that he's not all about demonic chaos. Blue Fangs even dropped a Bible reference mentioning how burning people accused of witchcraft doesn't sit well with God. Forgotten One, Castlevania Lament of Innocence. This is the monster of all monsters, created by the mortal hands and then sealed away in the prison of eternal torture. But why? It turns out he was like a ticking time bomb, ready to bring the world to the brink of destruction. If you're thinking about taking this guy on, you better be prepared. First, you'll need to get your hands on the unlocked jewel, which is tucked away in the pagoda of the Misty Moon. The Forgotten One isn't just a boss, he's a 3-stage fight fest. Think of it like a monster symphony. First, you deal with his organs, then his arm, and finally it's time to face the head honcho. If you haven't seen him, the Forgotten One isn't exactly winning any beauty contests. He's a gigantic, skinless torso with all his insides on full display. He's got a head that's sporting ox-like horns and tusks, giving him that demonic look, and to make things even spookier, he's all chained up with massive shackles, hooks, and chains. But what really sets him apart is his roar. It's a sonic boom that can bring down rocks and debris from above. And he shoots a devastating energy beam from his mouth too. And in case you haven't figured it out yet, the Forgotten One is known as one of the most unsettling bosses in the entire Castlevania series. He's the stuff of nightmares, the kind that'll have you checking under your bed before you go to sleep.
It's always easier when we let them get in range.
Merman. Now this underwater baddie is like the Jaws of the video game world, hiding near the shore and ready to strike. If you're thinking that he looks familiar, you're spot on. He is inspired by Gilman, the classic antagonist from the 1954 Universal horror film Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's a cross-genre homage. In the lore, the Gilman is the last survivor of an ancient race of amphibious humanoids that thrived during the Devonian Age. He's been chilling in a hidden lagoon deep within the Amazon rainforest. This guy's got some serious upgrades, with webbed hands and razor-sharp claws, scaly skin that's tough as a rock, and a healing factor that's just incredible. In fact, he can survive wounds that would put us mere mortals 6 feet under. And don't get me started on his superhuman strength. Now back to our gaming world, Merman is a real pain in the back for the players, especially when water's involved. This guy loves to make a splash by leaping out of the water and marching towards the player. And just when you think he's taking a break, he'll surprise you by spewing fireballs from his gaping mouth. After a little aquatic acrobatics, Merman might decide to take a dive back into the water or continue their land expedition looking for enemies to pick a fight with. Flagra and Gin. These guys are the dynamic demon duo of the Castlevania series, and these two are as loyal to death as the stars to the night sky. First, meet Flagra. He's a demonic knight ready for a ground brawl, and he wields a sharp spear. You'll often find him hanging out with Gin, and Gin is a different beast altogether. He's a fire-breathing winged demon, and he's got a hot temper. He's the wingman for death, always ready to fly into action. I remember him from Super Castlevania 4, where he was one of the final bosses, but don't be fooled, he's not just a one-time wonder. He's become a regular in the series, and he's got a knack for turning up in the wrong places at the wrong time. In the games, you'll often encounter these two when Death's in town. They're his loyal sidekicks, and they're always up to a good old fight. Flagra's moves include getting up close, ready to stab you with his spear, and if things get heated, he'll even resort to pecking at you with his beak. Gin, on the other hand, prefers a more aerial approach. He'll take to the skies, spewing fiery fireballs at you like he's auditioning for the circus. And in Super Castlevania 4, he can also land and bring down stalactites from the ceiling. Do you remember Flagra and Gin even making an appearance in the Castlevania animated series, taking on our heroes Trevor, Alucard, and Sypha at the Belmont house? It was quite the showdown. In fact, Trevor even used Slagra's own spear to put an end to him.
So, you've caught up already.
Isaac.
It's still too soon, but all the same. I'll test your abilities and see how much of your power has been restored.
The End Abel. The trusty pet of the Forge Master Isaac, Abel is what they call an innocent devil. These creatures are not ordinary pets. They can only be brought into existence by the magical hands of a devil forge master, which is just a fancy way of saying that Isaac has some serious supernatural skills. Abel, at his core, is a devilish creature. Think of it as the perfect mix between a battle-hardened warrior and a bird type. When Abel reaches his final form, known as the End, he's the grand finale of devilish evolution, and that's when things get tough, and Hector, another key player in this story, steps into the ring. Abel's right there fighting alongside Isaac, but things take a dark turn when Trevor Belmont, another major character, faces off with Isaac. In the heat of battle, Abel gets injured. Now, what happens to Abel after that showdown is a mystery, just one of those unsolved puzzles in a vampire's crypt. We're left in the dark, wondering about his fate. One thing that's hard to ignore is the color scheme. Abel's got that silver look, while Hector's own devil is all shiny and golden. It's like they're the yin and yang, just as Isaac and Hector are rivals, two sides of the same dark coin. Abel even makes an appearance in the Castlevania animated series. He's Isaac's trusty ally when they launch an assault on Carmela's castle. Although they don't drop his name in the show, we've got Adam Dietz, the associate director, to confirm it.
Welcome! I haven't had any visitors in a while.
Medusa, Castlevania Lament of Innocence. Now this creature is a real head-turner and not in a good way. In Castlevania, she's a regular showing up in nearly every game. Did you know Medusa's got snakes instead of hair in her gaze? If you lock eyes with her, you're looking at the future as a garden ornament. It turns you into stone, but sometimes she's called Queen Medusa, which makes it sound like she's the head of all things snake-related. And there's more to her than just a killer hair day. In some versions, she's got the inside scoop and ancient secrets. When Medusa struts onto the Castlevania scene, she's usually got a snake tail from her waist down, but there have been times when she's feeling a bit floaty and just shows up as a giant levitating head. And then there are those Medusa heads, those pesky little floaters that pop up as your everyday enemies in most games. According to the lore, they're basically Medusa's spawn, like they're born from her severed head. Medusa's look in the Castlevania series takes some inspiration from a classic scene in the 1981 film Clash of the Titans. That's the one where she really embraced the snake-tailed look. Before that, Medusa would be a gal with a human body with maybe a touch of green skin or some reptile scales. Beelzebub, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. The boss with the Lord of Flies title, this demon's got quite the reputation in Christian demonology, being one of those 7 big shots in hell. In the world of Castlevania, Beelzebub made his debut in Symphony of the Night, and let's just say, he's not a regular boss. Imagine a colossal, decaying corpse. However, he's not one for direct attacks. He's got a thing for being dramatic. Beelzebub's idea of combat is more like, I'll just control these massive flies that swarm around me. He also loves to unleash maggots that can give Alucard poisoning. While some folks might confuse Beelzebub with Satan, the Castlevania series takes that Lord of the Flies thing quite literally. You won't find him leading any infernal armies here, he just uses the flies and maggots as his minions. And the thing is, we're never really sure where all those flies are coming from, let alone how or why he ended up as a giant, hanging spectacle in the first place. In the Castlevania lineup of creepy monsters, Beelzebub earns his spot among the disturbing elite, right alongside the likes of Legion and the Forgotten One. This demon might not be your typical fire and brimstone kind, but he sure knows how to give you the creeps. Dragon Zombies, Castlevania Circle of the Moon. A real staple in the Castlevania series, this boss or beefed up enemy has seen better days. It's like a dragon that's had its magic zapped and now it's just a mindless wreck. The interesting thing about Dragon Zombies is their variations. In the world of Castlevania, these magical reanimations have gone through some changes. Sometimes they've retained some flesh, but it's all decayed and gross. In games like Castlevania Legends, they're practically oozing ickiness. But in the Castlevania Chronicles, they've taken on a more skeletal look. It's just bones and a hint of dragon. According to the legend in Castlevania Legends, this big fella known as the Death Dragon got on Count Dracula's bad side. So, Dracula decided to do a little redecoration and turned it into a living corpse to guard his castle. When it comes to combat, this dragon zombie isn't just your average fire breather. Sure, it can still shoot out fury blasts, but it mixes things up. It likes to keep the player guessing by spewing flames sporadically, and it's got some moves too. It can jump around and crash its hefty body to the ground, making the ceiling rain down debris and generally wreaking havoc on anyone trying to take it down. Maneater, Castlevania Order of Ecclesia. One of the quirky critters from the Castlevania series, a grotesque worm-like creature that takes up space inside a colossal skull. When it's feeling feisty, it goes on to attack by stretching out its wriggly tentacles for a little grabby-grab action, or just to keep things spicy, it shoots out ripple lasers. Now, about that skull. It's built tough so that the worm can reside in it without harm. You see, the worm inside it is a bit more delicate. This bizarre creature has worn many hats in the Castlevania series. Sometimes it's the main event as a boss, other times it's more of a warm-up mini-boss, and on occasion, it just hangs around as a regular enemy. The Maneater made its debut in the Super Castlevania 4 series. In that game, it was like the intermission act in the Outer Keep, a mid-level mini-boss. The big move? Lashing out that worm tongue or dropping debris from the ceiling every time it got a good smack. And in Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, the Maneater looks like it's been borrowing a few pages from the Scariest series. Another Konami classic, and here's another fun tidbit: when you finally put this bad boy down, you might just score yourself the Ripper Laser Soul, a neat nod to the Scariest series again. Marvelous verdict. In Castlevania, the creatures are more than just enemies. They are a crucial part of the series' enduring charm, drawing inspiration from classic horror tales. From the earliest 8-bit adventures to recent animated stories, Castlevania has featured a variety of creatures, challenging both vampire hunters and players. Whether it's the relentless Medusa heads, powerful bosses, or just lingering lesser enemies, these monsters infuse life into the series. They aren't merely villains, they symbolize the eternal battle between good and evil, paying tribute to classic horror literature and the monsters that have terrified us for centuries. Looking back on this beloved franchise's history, one thing remains clear. It's the monsters that have made Castlevania a thrilling and unforgettable experience etched in our memories. If you like our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.